The Velrathi had to convene a special council to debate the human proposal. The idea of downgrading their most sacred structure with primitive mechanical components was culturally painful. But the alternative was losing the archive entirely. They agreed to try. The implementation took 5 days. Sarah's team worked alongside Velrathi engineers who struggled with every step. Adding mechanical dampeners to systems that hadn't been designed for them required creativity rather than precision. Recalibrating the generators to accept the new environmental baseline meant abandoning centuries of refined calculations. But slowly, the archive began to stabilize. The sinking stopped first, then reversed slightly as the building settled into a new equilibrium with the planet beneath it. On the 6th day, the chief Velrathi engineer ran a full diagnostic. His skin flickered with colors that indicated confusion, wonder, and reluctant admiration. "The building is more stable now than it has been in our lifetime," he reported. "The generators are operating at 60% of previous power consumption because they're not constantly fighting compensation cycles. The mechanical dampeners are handling micro-adjustments that were creating cascade effects in the pure field system." Thelver stood before the human team, his skin settling into a color that Sarah's implant translated as humbled respect. "We called you here believing you could not possibly understand our technology," he said quietly. "We were correct. You do not understand it the way we do, but you understood something more important. You understood that perfection is not the same as resilience, that precise systems can be fragile, that sometimes the best solution is not the most elegant one. Your engineering is beautiful," Sarah said honestly. "Everything you build is a work of art. We're just good at dealing with messy reality. Perhaps that is what we need more of. Messy reality." Thelver's skin shifted to a warm amber that indicated friendship. "The Galactic Innovation Archives will record this. The humans who taught us that our perfection was making us brittle." Marcus laughed. "Wait until they hear about duct tape. That's really going to blow your minds." That night, as the team prepared to leave the Velrathi homeworld, James stood looking up at the Eternal Archive. The massive structure rose into the sky, now stabilized, secure for another 6,000 years. "You know what's funny?" he said. "They built something perfect 6,000 years ago. It took humans to teach them that staying perfect meant being willing to change." "That's not funny," Sarah said. "That's just sad." "No, it's hopeful. It means the galaxy has room for both kinds of engineers. The ones who build perfect things, and the ones who keep perfect things working in an imperfect universe." Sarah smiled. "I like that. Put it in the report." The report to the Galactic Innovation Archives was shorter than the Nexus 7 entry, but it made an even bigger impact. It described how human engineers had solved an impossible problem not with better technology, but with better understanding of how systems interact with changing environments. The final paragraph became required reading in engineering schools across 7 species. The Velrathi built perfection. Humans taught them that perfection without adaptation is just another word for obsolescence. In a changing universe, the best systems are not those that never break, but those that can bend. And across the galaxy, engineers began to reconsider what it meant to build something that would last. Part 3. The emergency council meeting was already in chaos when the humans arrived. Representatives from 7 different species shouted at each other in 4 different languages, while holographic displays showed the same terrible information from every angle. The consortium war fleet was dying, and nobody knew how to save it. Sarah Chun walked into the council chamber with her team behind her. The arguing continued for several moments before someone noticed them. "The humans are here," announced Coordinator Vex, her tentacles making gestures that called for silence. "Dr. Chun, your reputation precedes you. We hope you can help us where others have failed." Sarah looked at the displays. 847 ships trapped in a spatial anomaly, their unifying navigation system caught in a feedback loop that pulled them deeper into the distortion with every passing hour. 48 hours of life support remaining. She felt her stomach tighten. "That's a lot of ships," Marcus said quietly. "It's the pride of the consortium," Vex explained. 7 species, 100 years of combined development. The most advanced fleet in galactic history. And it's about to be completely destroyed because of a navigation system we built together. James was already studying the technical specifications. "Wait, you built this system by committee?" "Yes. Each species contributed their most advanced navigation technology. The system integrates the best elements of Krell jump calculations, Southern quantum positioning, Irithy spatial awareness, and 4 other species innovations." "It should have been perfect." "Should have been," Sarah repeated, noting the past tense. Commander Vaughn arrived then, the Krell engineer who had doubted the humans at Nexus 7. He looked exhausted. "Dr. Chun, I specifically requested your team. If anyone can solve this, it's you." "That's a lot of faith, Vaughn. Last time we met, you thought we were crazy. Last time, you saved 300 systems by breaking a precursor device. I've learned to appreciate crazy." He gestured at the displays. "We've modeled 17,000 scenarios. Every one ends with total fleet loss. The navigation system is too integrated. We can't shut down any component without crashing the entire network." Sarah studied the specifications for the unified navigation system. It was a masterpiece of engineering, layers upon layers of sophisticated technology, all working together. At least, it was supposed to work together. "What caused the feedback loop?" she asked. "Unknown. The fleet was performing standard exercises near the contested zone when spatial distortions appeared. The navigation system tried to compensate, but instead of correcting course, it began pulling the ships toward the anomaly center. Every attempt to override it has failed." Marcus was reading through additional documentation. "This system is really complicated. Like, unnecessarily complicated. It represents the finest technology from 7 species," said a Salthian representative, her crystalline body flashing with indignation. "Of course it is complex." "Complex isn't the same as good," Marcus muttered, but Sarah shot him a look that said, "Not helpful right now." The team spent the next 6 hours reviewing everything. The technical specifications ran to thousands of pages. The system architecture diagrams looked like abstract art. Every species had contributed multiple layers of technology, each one sophisticated and powerful on its own. But something was bothering Sarah. She kept going back to the beginning, to the design documents from when the project started. "Can I see the committee meeting logs?" she asked. "From when you were designing this system?" Vex looked confused. "The design documentation is all in the technical specifications. Why would you need the meeting records?" "Humor me. It took an hour to pull up the archived communications." Sarah, Marcus, and James read through them while the council representatives watched with puzzled expressions. Nobody had looked at these records since the project was completed 5 years ago. What they found was enlightening and depressing in equal measure. "Oh no," James said, reading one particular exchange. They argued about everything. The meeting logs showed years of debate. The Krell insisted their jump calculation methods were superior to Salthian quantum positioning. The Salthians argued that Krell methods were outdated. The Irithy claimed their spatial awareness technology should override both. Each species had fought to include their technology, fought to give it priority, fought to ensure their contribution wasn't diminished. The result was a compromise where nobody compromised. Every species got their way. Every technology was included with equal priority. The system was designed by committee, and the committee had never agreed on anything. "It's not a unified system," Sarah said slowly. It's 7 different systems all trying to be in charge at the same time. Vaughn looked at the logs. But the integration testing showed it worked perfectly. In normal space, sure. But look what happens when there's a crisis. Sarah pulled up the current system logs from the trapped fleet. The moment the anomaly appeared, every subsystem tried to respond according to its own logic. Krell jump calculations say, go this direction. Southian quantum positioning says go that direction. Irithy spatial awareness says stop moving entirely. And because you gave them all equal authority, they're fighting each other for control. The system is arguing with itself, Marcus said. And while it argues, it's dragging 800 ships into a spatial anomaly. The council chamber fell silent. 7 species looked at each other, seeing the truth in what the humans described. Their perfect collaboration had been anything but collaborative. So what do? Vex asked. We can't rewrite the system in 48 hours. No, Sarah agreed. But maybe we don't need to. She looked at her team. Marcus was frowning at the specifications. James was sketching something in his notebook. Both of them had the same expression Sarah recognized from Nexus 7 and from the Volrathi homeworld. The expression that said they were about to suggest something that sounded completely insane. Tell me you have an idea, Bourne said. The alarm screamed through every corridor of Nexus 7. Engineers from a dozen different species ran through the massive research station, their faces showing the same expression across all their varied features. Pure Terror. Commander Zilth Ara stood in the central control room, her forearms moving rapidly across holographic displays that all showed the same terrible news. The quantum resonance stabilizer was dying. The device sat at the heart of the station, a massive sphere of impossible geometry left behind by the precursors 15,000 years ago. Nobody truly understood how it worked. They only knew what it did. It kept a dying star stable enough to power faster-than-light communications for 300 inhabited systems across the sector. How long? Silthera asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. 72 hours until catastrophic failure, replied Chief Engineer Vaughn. His species, the Krell, had built starships for 3,000 years. If Vaughn said something was impossible, the rest of the galaxy listened. Maybe less. Around them, the best engineering minds in known space worked frantically. The Southian engineers calculated mathematical models that would take a human computer weeks to process, doing it all in their massive, beautiful minds. The Irithy worked with tools so precise they could manipulate individual atoms. The Draven brought engineering knowledge past, down through 200 generations of master craftsmen. None of it mattered. The stabilizer was failing, and nobody knew how to stop it. We could try a complete shutdown and restart, suggested one of the Southian engineers. Her crystalline body flickering with uncertain light, Vaughn shook his head. A gesture he'd learned from watching too many human entertainment programs. A shutdown would collapse the star's containment field. 300 systems would lose FDL communication. Ships caught mid-jump would be lost in dead space. We're looking at millions of deaths. Then, we evacuate the station and let it fail, Zilthera said quietly. We can't risk trying to fix something we don't understand. Not with those stakes. That was when the humans arrived. Dr. Sarah Chun walked into the control room with 3 other humans trailing behind her. They wore simple jumpsuits that looked almost primitive compared to the elegant engineering suits of the other species. Sarah carried a battered toolbox that looked like it had survived several small wars. Her companion, a tall man named Marcus Webb, was eating something from a wrapper. The room fell silent. Several engineers stared. The Arathi representative made a sound that didn't translate but clearly meant he was not impressed. You called for the Human Engineering Guild, Sarah said, setting down her toolbox with a heavy thunk. We're here to help. Vaughan's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or disbelief. With respect, Dr. Chun, humanity has been part of the galactic community for 40 standard years. This technology is 15,000 years old. Our best engineers have declared the situation unsolvable. Then it's a good thing we're not your best engineers, Marcus said around a mouthful of protein bar. He grinned when several aliens made disgusted sounds. We're just humans. We do things differently. Sarah was already walking toward the stabilizer chamber. Show us the device. They led the human team down 3 levels to a massive spherical room. The stabilizer floated in the center, a perfect sphere of dark metal covered in patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Streams of energy connected it to the star below, visible through the transparent floor as a roiling mass of barely contained fusion. The other engineers had set up a perimeter of diagnostic equipment around the chamber. Holographic displays showed thousands of data points, energy readings, quantum measurements, all the information that 36 brilliant minds had analyzed for the past week. Sarah ignored all of it. She walked right up to the stabilizer until she was standing just outside the safety barrier, staring at the device itself. "What are you doing?" asked the Southian engineer. "The diagnostic data is back at the monitoring station. I'm looking at it," Sarah said simply. "The diagnostic equipment can see far more than organic eyes. Maybe, but I see different things." Sarah pulled out a handheld scanner from her toolbox. It looked crude compared to the elegant instruments around them. "Marcus, set up the coffee maker rig." "Coffee maker rig?" Vaughan repeated. "This is not time for beverages." Marcus laughed. "Not for drinking, for measuring." He pulled out what looked like a disassembled coffee maker, some wire, and a small computer tablet. Within minutes, he had connected it all together in a configuration that made the other engineers physically uncomfortable to look at. "This is madness," the Earthy engineer said. "You cannot diagnose precursor technology with kitchen appliances." "Watch us," Marcus said cheerfully. For the next 6 hours, the humans did something that baffled everyone watching. They didn't study the precursor schematics that had been translated over thousands of years. They didn't run theoretical models or quantum calculations. Instead, they measured what the device was actually doing. Right now, in this moment, Sarah crawled around the safety barrier with her scanner, taking readings from angles that made no sense according to proper engineering protocol. Marcus's coffee maker contraption beeped and hummed, recording vibrations and energy fluctuations that the sophisticated equipment had filtered out as noise. The third human, James Okonkwo, did something even stranger. He sat on the floor with a paper notebook and sketched the energy patterns by hand, adding little notes and arrows. "The theoretical energy flow should follow this pattern," Vaughan explained, showing them a beautiful holographic model. "But it's deviating by 14%. That deviation is cascading into system failure." "Right," Sarah said, still studying her crude scanner readings. "But what if the deviation isn't a bug? What if it's a feature?" The Southian engineer's crystalline body flashed with colors that translated to confusion and frustration. "That makes no sense. Deviation from optimal parameters is by definition a flaw." "Is it?" Sarah spread out her readings on the floor. "Look at this. The device isn't fighting the deviation. It's compensating for it, like it's expecting it." Marcus pointed at his coffee maker display. "And these vibrations, they're not random. They're rhythmic. The device is humming along, doing its thing. And then every 47 minutes, all your fancy equipment tries to correct it back to theoretical optimal. And every time you do that, the device has to work harder to maintain stability." "Are you saying the device is working incorrectly on purpose?" Vaughan asked. "I'm saying your definition of correct might be wrong," Sarah replied. James, show them your drawings. James held up his notebook. His sketches showed the energy patterns, but he'd added something the computer models didn't have: time-based annotations. The pattern changes based on the star's output cycle. Every fluctuation, every spike, the stabilizer adapts. It's not trying to maintain a perfect static state. It's dancing with the star. Dancing, the Irithie repeated flatly. You describe precision quantum engineering as dancing. Yeah, because that's what it's doing. Look, here's what I think happened. James flipped to a new page. This thing was built 15,000 years ago to work with this specific star at that point in its life cycle. But stars change, right? Even on geological timescales. So the precursor's built-in adaptability. The device is supposed to drift. It's supposed to fluctuate. That's how it stays stable. Sarah nodded. But somewhere along the way, someone decided to fix it. They probably saw the drift, thought it was damage or degradation, and adjusted the system to match theoretical optimal parameters. That's proper engineering, Bourne protested. You maintain equipment according to specifications. Sure, if your specifications account for 15,000 years of stellar evolution, Marcus said. But I'm betting whoever did that maintenance was working from translated schematics that didn't include the precursor's notes about adaptive function. So they locked the device into a static pattern. And for a while, it worked fine. The device is tough. It compensated. But the star kept changing, and eventually, the compensation couldn't keep up anymore. The room was very quiet. 36 of the galaxy's finest engineers stared at 3 humans and their ridiculous coffee maker equipment. You're saying the solution is to let the device deviate from specifications. Silthara said slowly. Not just let it deviate. Encourage it. Remove the compensators that are forcing it into a static pattern. And here's the fun part. Sarah grinned. We need to intentionally break 3 of the stabilizer's supposedly critical components. These ones. She pointed at her scanner readings. They're the ones fighting the adaptive response hardest. Break them, Bourne said. You want to break a precursor device that's already failing. Trust me, I know it sounds insane. But look at the data. Every time these components activate, the overall system stability drops. They're not helping anymore. They're probably the ones that got upgraded to enforce static parameters. And if you're wrong, ask the Southian engineer. If you break those components and the device collapses entirely, then we're in the same place you'd be in 72 hours anyway, Marcus said with a shrug. Except we tried something. Silthara looked around at her assembled experts. Every one of them looked doubtful, skeptical, even horrified at what the humans were suggesting. But every one of them owls. 6 months after Nexus 7, Dr. Sarah Chun's team arrived at the Velrethi homeworld expecting gratitude. Instead, they got cold stares and barely concealed hostility. The Velrethi were an old species, one of the first to achieve faster-than-light travel. Their cities were architectural marvels, built with mathematics so precise that their structures seemed to defy physics itself. Their most sacred building, the Eternal Archive, had stood for 6,000 years without shifting a single millimeter. Now it was sinking into the ground. And the Velrethi were not happy about who had been called to help. We specifically requested Krell engineers, said Archive Master Thelver, his tall frame rigid with displeasure. His skin, which could change color to express emotion, was a deep purple that Sarah's translation implant marked as profound embarrassment and anger. We did not request humans. The Krell recommended us, Sarah said diplomatically. After Nexus 7, they thought we might see something others missed. Others have not missed anything. We understand the problem perfectly. The anti-gravity generators are failing due to age. The solution requires replacing components we can no longer manufacture. It is a matter of resources, not in sight. Marcus looked up at the massive structure. The Eternal Archive rose 300 meters into the sky, a tower of crystalline walls and impossible angles. It shouldn't be able to stand at all according to basic physics, yet it had stood longer than human recorded history. Except now, the base was sinking into the ground at a rate of 3 centimeters per day. At the current rate, the entire structure would collapse within a week. If you know the problem is the anti-gravity generators, why are we here? Marcus asked. Delver's skin flushed darker. Because the council insisted. They believe your unorthodox methods might prove useful. I believe it is a waste of time while our greatest cultural achievement dies. Sarah could understand his frustration. The archive held 6 millennia of Velrathi history, art, literature, and science. Thousands of archivists were working day and night to evacuate the most precious materials, but there was too much to save. If the building collapsed, the Velrathi would lose a huge part of their identity. "Show us the generators," she said. They descended into the archive's foundation, deep beneath the surface. The anti-gravity generators were massive cylindrical devices, 20 of them arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. Each one hummed with power, creating fields that should have made the entire structure weightless. Hundreds of Velrathi engineers surrounded the generators, working with elegant precision. They moved in synchronized teams, their mathematics-based communication allowing them to coordinate without speaking. Sarah watched them work for a moment and felt a pang of inadequacy. Everything they did was exact, calculated, perfect. They've tried 17,000 different adjustments, Delver explained. Each one precisely calculated. Each one has failed. The building continues to sink. What about turning the generators off and on again? Marcus suggested that every Velrathi in the chamber stopped and turned to stare at him. The silence was deafening. "That is not amusing," Delver said coldly. "A full shutdown would cause immediate structural collapse. The archive would be destroyed in seconds." "Right, sorry." "Bad joke." Marcus held up his hands. "But seriously, have you tried any solutions that aren't precise adjustments to the generators?" "The generators are the problem. Why would we look elsewhere?" Sarah's teammate, James Okonkwo, had already pulled out his scanning equipment and was wandering away from the generators. The Velrathi watched him with confusion and annoyance. "What is he doing?" Delver asked. "His thing," Sarah replied. "James, find anything interesting?" "Give me a couple days," James called back. He was scanning the walls, the floor, even the air itself. "I need to build a picture of what's happening down here." "A picture?" "We have complete sensor data of every system in this building." "Great. I'm going to go look at dirt." Delver's skin went through several colors that the translation implant struggled with. Sarah was pretty sure one of them meant, "I am questioning every life choice that led to this moment." For the next 2 days, James did exactly what he said. He studied the planet itself. He went to the surface and took core samples of the ground around the archive. He measured electromagnetic fields, thermal gradients, and underground water flows. He spent hours in the Velrathi's historical library, reading about geological changes over the past 6,000 years. Meanwhile, Sarah and Marcus studied the generators themselves. They watched the Velrathi engineers work, noting their methods. Every calculation was perfect. Every adjustment was executed flawlessly. And nothing worked. "They're incredible," Marcus said quietly as they watched a team recalibrate one of the generators with microscopic precision. Everything they do is exact. No wasted motion, no guesswork. Just pure engineering mastery. Then why isn't it working? Sarah wondered. On the 3rd day, James called them to the surface. He had spread out dozens of papers with maps, charts, and his characteristic hand-drawn diagrams. The Velrathi engineers who had been shadowing the human team gathered around. their expressions making it clear they expected nothing useful. "Okay, so here's the thing," James started. "The anti-gravity generators aren't failing. They're working exactly as designed." "That's impossible," Delver said. "If they were working correctly, the building wouldn't be sinking." "Right, but here's what I found. 6,000 years ago, when you built this place, the groundwater table was here." He pointed at a map. "The mineral content in the soil was this. The thermal currents from the planet's mantle ran in this pattern. Your generators were calibrated to work with those specific conditions. They create a stable field that perfectly counters local gravity by accounting for all those factors. Yes, we know all this. This is basic anti-gravity theory." "Sure, but what happens when those conditions change?" The Vorathi looked at each other. "They don't change. Local geological conditions are stable over such timescales." James shook his head. "Not when you industrialize a planet. Look at this." He pulled up more maps showing the development of Vorathi civilization around the archive. "Over 6,000 years, you built 3 major cities within 100 kilometers. You redirected 2 rivers for irrigation. You dug deep mines that changed underground water flows. You built a geothermal power plant that altered thermal patterns in the crust. Our industrial development is nowhere near the archive. Environmental protections prevent any construction within 10 kilometers. Yeah, the geology doesn't care about property lines. Underground, it's all connected. The groundwater table has dropped by 40 meters. The mineral composition of the soil has changed as water carried different deposits. The thermal currents are completely different now. Your generators are working perfectly for conditions that haven't existed for 3,000 years." Sarah saw it immediately. The generators are trying to maintain a perfect field based on the original environmental data. But the environment has changed, so they're compensating. They're working harder and harder to maintain what they think is normal, but normal has shifted. The extra effort is causing system stress. "Not just stress," James added. "Look at this." He showed them energy readings. Every time a generator tries to compensate for the new conditions, it treats them as anomalies. Temporary problems to be corrected. But they're not temporary. They're the new reality. So the generators are fighting the planet itself, and the planet is winning. Marcus was grinning now. It's like Nexus 7 all over again. Perfect systems designed for one set of conditions, trying to maintain perfection while everything around them changes. Thalver's skin had gone through another series of colors. He was silent for a long moment. "So the solution is what? We cannot change 6,000 years of planetary development." "No, but you can change how the generators respond to it," Sarah said. "Stop treating the new conditions as errors to be corrected. Treat them as the new baseline. Recalibrate the entire system to work with how the planet is now, not how it was 6 millennia ago. That would require rewriting the fundamental operating parameters," one of the Velrathi engineers said. "The generators would no longer match their original specifications." "Right. They'd be better." The Velrathi struggled with this concept. Their entire engineering philosophy was built on perfection and precision. The idea of deliberately deviating from original specifications felt wrong to them on a fundamental level. "There's another thing," James added. "Your generators are amazing, but they're designed to maintain a completely static field. 0 variation. That works great in stable conditions. But when conditions shift, they can't adapt gradually. They have to make sudden, large adjustments. That's what's causing the sinking. The generators keep overcorrecting. So we make them less precise?" Delver sounded pained by the very idea. "We make them more adaptable," Sarah corrected. "We add dampeners. Simple mechanical systems that can handle small variations without the generators having to constantly recalibrate. It won't be as elegant, but it'll be more stable. Mechanical systems. You mean physical dampers like we used 4,000 years ago before we perfected pure field technology? Yep, sometimes old technology exists for a reason. It's not sophisticated, but it's robust. We have an idea, Sarah confirmed. You're not going to like it. They presented the plan to the council 30 minutes later. The reaction was exactly what Sarah expected. Shock, outrage, and complete disbelief. You want to break the unified system? The Southian representative said, a crystalline body flashing colors that indicated she thought the humans had lost their minds. That's the problem, not the solution. The unified system is the problem, Sarah insisted. It was designed to be 7 different systems pretending to be one system. So let's stop pretending. Let each ship use its native species navigation technology independently. That would create chaos, Vex protested. Ships moving in different patterns, using different calculations, responding to threats differently. It violates every principle of fleet coordination. Fleet coordination already failed, Marcus pointed out. Your unified system is what trapped them. We're suggesting you replace one big failure with 800 small successes. Each species knows how to navigate their own ships, James added, showing his sketches. Krell ships using Krell navigation have successfully escaped spatial anomalies before. So have Southian ships using Southian quantum positioning. So have Irithy ships using Irithy methods. Every species in that fleet has proven navigation technology. The only thing that's failed is the attempt to combine them all. Vorn was studying the proposal carefully. You're saying we write an override protocol that allows each ship to revert to its native navigation system. Exactly. The ships will escape the anomaly using different methods, taking different paths, arriving at different times. It won't be elegant. It won't look like a coordinated fleet action. But it'll work. You cannot possibly know that, the Southian representative said. No, we can't, Sarah admitted. But we know your current approach is guaranteed to fail. This gives each ship a chance based on proven technology. Proven because each species has been using their own methods successfully for centuries. The council debated for 2 hours. Some species saw the logic immediately. Others struggled with the idea of abandoning the unified system they'd spent years developing. The political implications were significant, admitting that their great collaborative achievement had failed. But the alternative was losing 800 ships and their crews. We'll try the human solution, Vex finally announced. Coordinator Vorn, work with Dr. Chun's team to develop the override protocol. You have 36 hours. The next day and a half blurred together. Sarah's team worked with engineers from all 7 species, writing code that would allow each ship to bypass the unified system and revert to its native navigation. It was like disassembling a massive puzzle, finding the individual pieces that had been forced together. The hardest part wasn't the technical work. It was the politics. Each species wanted assurances that their navigation system was respected, that the override wouldn't favor any one approach, that they weren't being blamed for the failure. Sarah spent almost as much time mediating between species as she did writing code. This is ridiculous, Marcus said during a brief break. We're trying to save their fleet and they're arguing about who gets credit. They're scared, Sarah said. This fleet represented unity. Admitting it failed means admitting their unity was flawed. That's hard, but necessary. Yeah, but hard. With 6 hours of life support remaining, the override protocol was ready. It would be transmitted to the fleet and would allow each ship's captain to manually activate their native navigation system. From that point on, each vessel would be on its own. This is it, Meg said as they prepared to transmit. Dr. Chun, if you're wrong, we're about to watch 800 ships die. Then I better be right, Sarah said. trying to sound more confident than she felt. The override transmitted. For 10 agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Then the first ship broke free. A Krell vessel, using their traditional jump calculations, simply forced its way through the anomaly's edge. It worked because Krell navigation had always been about brute force calculations, and the ship applied that philosophy without any compromise. Then a Selthian ship escaped, using quantum positioning to find the path of least resistance through the distortion. Different method, same result. One by one, ships began pulling free. Some species ships escaped in groups, their similar approaches allowing for spontaneous coordination. Others broke out individually, each finding their own path. It was chaos. It was messy. It was completely uncoordinated. It was working. 6 hours later, the last ship cleared the anomaly. 847 vessels were safe, scattered across a region of space 10 light-years wide, each having escaped using their own methods.